elastic things can be fun to play with. You can wrap and pull and stretch. Look at that. But the problem with elastic is sometimes you don't do well with it. Elastic things aren't always fun and easy and good. Like gluten. Let me explain. This is Dr. Michael Berglund. Welcome to Common Sense Medicine. Today's talk is, what is gluten and is it bad for me? Let's pretend this is not a wooden figurine of a human body, okay? This is just a shape. What you need to understand is where gluten comes from. So let's say, since wheat's the most common grain that we have in our society, let's talk about wheat, okay? So wheat is a seed. I don't know if you knew grain and seed, same thing. When I'm talking about wheat, there's three main parts of wheat. There is the bran, okay, which is the outside skin. We hear of wheat bran, that's the bran, okay? And we like that from a digestive side of things because it helps us with bowel movements, it helps to irritate, it's good, right? So then inside there we also have something called wheat germ. The germ is where all the oils and B vitamins and a lot of the nutrients are stored in the germ. That's the nutritional potential for the seed. When they make white flour, they take the bran off, they take the germ out, and you end up with just what's left, which is called the endosperm. The endosperm is starch and protein. Okay, the starch is the fuel, right, for the seed, something to start it off with, okay, at least to get it going. The protein part is where the DNA is where the body's going to get that information and make it into a stalk. So like, okay, you were talking about gluten, why'd you go into the whole seed anatomy lesson, okay? Well, because the gluten is in this endosperm, this middle section here. The reason I'm using a human body here, I'm using it because it has all these features. It's really a protein, right? It's the endosperm, but this is the protein. And protein is, to the human body, right, is a lot like, can look like viruses, all right? It can be used for building muscle and mass and doing all these different things. It can also be thought of, if it's seen certain times, it can be thought it's a virus. That's kind of what we're focused in on. So the protein part of this endosperm is what we're focused in on. And the reason I have all these different little features is because each different part of the endosperm, part of this molecule, is a potential source for the body to have a problem. Like, I have a problem with this, or I have a problem with this, or I have a problem with this. Every time it sees it and it says I have a problem with it, it's going to make an antibody toward that. So is gluten inherently bad? No. Gluten is just gluten. There's a lot of people that have no problem with it whatsoever, and gluten by itself is not a problem. But the problem lies in some people, when they see it, their body creates an abnormal response to it. What we're looking at is several different antibody tests that the medical doctors might run. They might run something called the TTG, or the tissue transglutaminase antibody, and that can be generally is in an IgA form, and that is fairly conclusive for people. It picks up most of the people with celiac disease. Generally, there's another one called the deaminated gliadin peptidase, okay, and that one also can be run as a secondary test. You'll see a variety of other tests that the medical system will run. Each several years we get more tests to run. When I first started off like 20 years ago, there was hardly any tests at all. They did it mostly based on symptoms. Then they came up with an anti-gliadin antibody, then they came up with two anti-gliadin, an IgG and an IgM, and now there's a whole panel that they run. So the question is, do you have positive antibodies within the blood test? If you do, and you have something in your gut called atrophic gastritis, meaning in your system you should have what's called villi, or finger-like projections into your intestines. If those are flattened out, if they are shortened, right, and they do an endoscopy, meaning they send a camera down your gut and they see those things, they'll go, okay, you have this positive blood test and you have atrophic gastritis, you have celiac disease. What happens if you don't have all the antibodies, or you don't have the atrophic gastritis? What happens? Can you still have a problem with gluten or with wheat? And the answer is yes. Now some people would go, my doctor says that's not possible. My doctor says like you have to have all these things. Here's my logic, okay? If you eat wheat and you feel crappy, you have a problem with wheat. If you eliminate wheat and all of a sudden you start feeling better, then generally you have a wheat problem. The rules of thumb that I have are if you have tonsillitis or swollen adenoids or both, you generally have had a wheat allergy in your past. That's almost an automatic. Some people would just vehemently disagree, and they are allowed to do that, but that's been my rule of thumb. What I recommend for a lot of people is do an elimination provocation diet. So you just go, well, tell you what, rather than running on this whole series of hundreds and thousands of dollars of blood work, why don't you just, for a month, right, eliminate all sources of gluten out of your diet. That would include wheat, that would include semolina, durum, gram, spelt, that would include rye, barley, oats if they're not gluten-free oats. There's a variety of these different kinds of gluten-containing products. Just eliminate them all. Corn has a different kind of gluten, but it's not the same kind of gluten. Rice has no gluten in it, so we don't have to worry about it. But if you eliminate all those different grains and you feel better, then the answer is set. If you don't know if you feel better, you're like, oh, I don't know if I feel better or not, then I say have a day, right? Bring those foods back in. If you feel fine, then I guess you don't have a problem, and we can move on to the next thing. If you go, you know what, I didn't know if I felt better, but I had a day, or I even had a meal, and I felt awful, and this is how I felt awful, or the next day I woke up and I was like, oh my gosh, like what hit me? That's what we're talking about. Just so you know, I was doing this 20 years ago when the medical system looked at me like, not only do people have gluten problems, and I was diagnosing a lot of people with it, and they were looking at me like I was crazy. Now everybody's going, oh yeah, gluten, 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 gluten. Everybody's got a gluten problem. So here's what I've discovered recently, all right, just so you know. There are sources of gluten that I found that my patients are able to do. And you would say, well, tell me what those are, because and tell me why. I'm like, well, here's the thing. Some of those, a lot of the grains that I'm finding they can do, like spelt, like kamut, they could be even in white flour form or whole grain form. They test fine for people, and when they bring them into their diet, they don't have the same response they get out of the what I call the newer grains. These are called heirloom grains. They're ancient grains. They've been around for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, whereas the ones that we have in America generally have been around for less than 100, maybe less than 50. Because we're trying to perfect we're trying to figure out what wheat's growing better seasons, can we make a better pastry flour using a higher gluten content so it's stretchier, right? And so there's all these different things that we're looking at, and we're not focused on tradition. Where in Europe, a lot of these grains tend to be older grains. One of the things I suggest people try is whole grain spelt, to see if you can do it. If you know you have a reaction, once you figure out you have a gluten problem, once you figure you have celiac disease, once you figure that you have some reaction to wheat, right? Then try this wheat, spelt wheat. Try this wheat and see if you have a problem with it, see if you can get by with it. The other one I want you to suggest you try is Ezekiel 4.9 bread. It's made from a company called Food for Life, which I don't get any sponsorship from, I don't get anything from, but I've been using their bread for a long, long time for my patients, and a lot of them that can't handle normal grains can handle it. Here's the thing. If you have gluten problems, it's not the end of the world. This is actually the best time of all times to have gluten problems, because there's so many people making gluten-free products and everything. I also encourage you to experiment, okay? I encourage you to try to see. I always tell people it's like having a big field, and you need to know where the landmines are. And you can just walk around the whole field, but I encourage you to try and figure out where the mines are, and try and then mark them with a little flag and going, okay, I can't do that, I can't do this, but I certainly can travel this path through the field. And then it makes life a little bit easier and worth living. Plus, then you can make choices. If I'm going to this wedding, if I'm going to this, I dare not do that because I know what will happen with that. I better bring my own stuff. All right? This is Dr. Michael Berglund. Today we've been talking about gluten, and I've just had a ball. How about you?